Hi, welcome to the module on diversity, inclusion, and inequality.
These are three distinct but interrelated topics that we will talk about in this training video.
So, Larissa, what do you think about diversity and inclusion?
Dylan, I'm glad you asked. As CES puts it, to substantially consider and integrate diversity into community engagement is to address the role of social inequality as an inescapable determinant, mediator, and object of the project. Attention to diversity and inclusion, in other words, is indispensable to combating inequality.
Absolutely. To value diversity and community engagement is, at minimum, to engage in deep reflection about how many levels and aspects of identity, including race, ethnicity, gender, class, culture, sexual orientation, age, education, and language differences, amongst other powerful social constructs and divisions, might impact and be impacted by service.
Right. If we aim to address inequality, then we must first acquaint ourselves with how inequalities intersect with each other and reinforce one another. For example, one might be male and heterosexual, but they might have other intersecting identities, like being trans and a person of color. Although understanding and accommodating how these identities can intersect and interact with each other can be difficult, a willingness to listen in good faith and patience to see outside of your perspective is a great first step.
In addition to continually educating ourselves about the systematic exclusion of historically marginalized peoples, we must also make this theoretical commitment to inclusion concrete and material in our own actions.
Yes, making inclusion concrete means, among other things, actively including the historically marginalized in project inspiration, design, and decision-making, and implementation. Attention to diversity and inclusion involves attending to systematically silenced voices and inviting historically excluded voices into the conversation. This may refer, for some of us, to our own voices too.
Exactly. A true commitment to diversity and inclusion in the work of a university must go beyond the incremental tweaking of student demographics and surface-level transformations that fail to substantially address the history and persistence of deeply entrenched inequalities. This, in essence, is tokenism. Increasing diversity in community engagement does not mean artificially curating a range of perspectives and checking inclusion off the checklist, but centering the voices of the historically marginalized.
Let's explore some examples. To serve everyone, we have to be considerate of their unique backgrounds and identities. For example, Dylan, a trans person, might not feel comfortable in an organization because there are no other trans people in it. Or perhaps there is no official commitment on its part to being a safe and inclusive space for queer people across the spectrum. To me, diversity not only means the actual, real representation of historically marginalized communities, but also the empowerment of those communities through the principle of inclusion at every level of involvement.
If I may add on, that also relates to inequality. People with historically marginalized backgrounds, genders, races, upbringings, and other socioeconomic statuses, amongst other identities, might not feel comfortable in the same way that many individuals with privileged identities in an organization do. It's wonderful how many identities people can experience freely and truly in every level, but we should nonetheless be aware of the way that privilege and identities of privilegedness weave into how people can access those organizations. By including and uplifting the voices of diverse individuals in organizational changes or goal making, or by committing to diversity in the truest sense, we may be able to do something about inequality itself.
Absolutely. I would also add that a more just and equitable society is, at the end of the day, better for all of us. By advocating for diversity and inclusion, we can not only deepen our relationships with historically excluded communities, but also create avenues of responsibility for our own organizations to alleviate the inequality you're speaking about.
Wow, Larissa, I really appreciated that talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you. These questions are important for us to ask in tackling a few social and societal barriers to volunteering, service, and community engagement practices.
That's absolutely right. Next up is Principle 5.